It means to see through the nonsense, the superstition, the dogma, and affirm the truth of humanity. We are spirit incarnate. We are here to love one another, beginning with ourselves. You know, when I was a new student, I heard about a workshop by a rather famous minister, and it said advanced spirituality. Well, you know, I wanted to jump right over basic, so I attended this expensive workshop. And it turned out that the most advanced spirituality was also the most basic. It was all about self-love, all about self-esteem, all about self-image. And that little song we sang this morning, I love myself so much, so I can love you so much, so you can love you so much, and you can start loving me. It's a very profound sentiment written by Ricky Byers and Michael. And in fact, I cannot love you if I don't love myself. You cannot love me if you don't love yourself. We cannot create a world of love unless we're all beginning from a sense of self-worth, self-respect, but not psychological so much as spiritual. Knowing that there's something beyond, there's something greater than us that is being us, always present right where we are. And that means we have a potential that's vast. In fact, it's boundless. We have a potential for love that's beyond anything we've ever known or anything we've ever done with love so far. And so teachings like this encourage us to practice the tools that have been handed down through the generations that give us a deeper sense of ourselves. And that would, of course, be meditation and treatment, spiritual mind treatment. And it would be all sorts of wonderful things that give us goosebumps. We used to say God bumps. I want to begin today with a quote from a neuroscientist. By the way, there was a quote by the Dalai Lama this morning on Facebook that I'm in love with him, you know. He said, any religion that does not include quantum physics is a dead religion. That's us coming alive by moving spirituality and science closer together. This neuroscientist said, humans uniquely appreciate aesthetics, experiencing pleasurable responses to complex stimuli that confer no clear intrinsic value for survival. In other words, a certain experience might bring us satisfaction without directly contributing to our ability to stay alive. Why is that? What is it about us that can cry when we hear a certain passage in music? What is it about us that a poem can give us goosebumps or quicken something in us that we haven't felt for a long time or maybe never? What is it about us that seeks beauty and recognizes it and feels empowered because it exists? It's the soul. It's the soul that seeks beauty and order and majesty and harmony and all the things that make life worth living. This is an article that neuroscientists quote that I read was about how things like beautiful music can move us. And he said there's a connection to beauty in us from the soul. You know, some religions that are associated today with terrible acts of terrorism condemn music. After 9/11, the day after, I was minister in Santa Cruz at the time, we decided to have a special service of prayer and music and treatment. And I invited, with all good intentions of creating more harmony in the community, I invited the local imam from the Muslim religion to come and speak. He would not shake my hand because I'm female, and he left when we started playing music. It told me a lot about what's wrong with the world, the superstitions and the things that people believe that are causing them to act like anything but loving souls, or anything but joyful beings, or anything but God expressing. And whenever I talk like this, people say, well, you shouldn't put down other religions. Why not? If it's causing terrorism on the planet, if it's causing people to hurt other people. We have to speak about it. I just read the most interesting article. And I loved it because it backed up what I believe. Of course, don't you love things when you're right? Yeah. But this article was about why people are leaving churches in droves. You know, the Unity Church here closed, and the Christian Science Church is closing down, and even our churches aren't growing, our centers aren't growing, except for a few exceptions. This was a scholarly article by someone who's been studying this and researching this for a long time. And here's what he said. They don't come because they don't like the music. They don't come because your coffee's too weak. They don't come because you don't have a good enough children's program. And they named all the things people give the reasons why people don't come to church. He said they don't come anymore because you're not talking about what needs to be talked about. Because what needs to be talked about, the world calls political, and it isn't. We need to be talking in our centers about human rights, about civil rights, about being the spark for other people, about helping the homeless, about women's rights, about gay rights. That's what I've always done, and I think that's how I built all the churches I built, and they were big. The people that are coming here now are leaning in that direction, and the people that left are looking for something else. God bless them. But I believe, like Martin Luther King, you know, he started the civil rights movement. He was a minister in his church. That's where the spark got ignited. Because there is a truth about the human race that it needs to know. And when it knows it, we will have a different planet. We will have more equity. We will have more justice. We will have more joy, more celebration. And we can imagine that, can't we? So we have to address these issues because they are spiritual problems and they have a spiritual answer. And so we always begin with us. So notice that art and music have been removed from our schools. You have to notice this stuff. When I was a kid, it was required. Music appreciation was required, and we loved it. And we sang in the choir. We had to, whether we could sing or not. Because there was an understanding that the soul needs art and music. The soul needs beauty. The soul needs to feel connected to those invisible powers that create music and art and beauty. So the most dangerous people on the planet are those who are walking around disconnected from their source and disconnected from the soul with a low-grade sense of unworthiness because they are so invested in survival or a perceived sense of having to steal, beg, or borrow from somebody else. Now, incidentally, those people might be rich. We're not talking about poor people here. We're talking about a poverty and impoverishment of the soul, of the self, of the spirit. So they're the first people to shout, crucify. The first to take up arms against a perceived enemy, and they see enemies everywhere. So my observations of the condition we are in led me to believe that the human race has been operating from a low self-esteem for a very long time, as a collective. And you know, everybody here knows if you raise your sense of who you are, your life begins to get better, doesn't it? Aren't you healthier in relationships if you have a strong sense of self? If you think someone's going to complete you, watch out. You're not going to like how they can complete you because they can't. And if you get involved with someone so you can fix them, forget it. We're all highly individualized expressions. And we all have a path, and we all have to find it. We can be the spark, but we can't be the savior. We can spark. That's our job as New Thought religious scientists, is to spark other people, to be the best they can, to find out who they are. Not to fix them, but to awaken, right? So with all the religions there are in the world, it feels like a godless world to me, in the sense that a lot of people are worshiping a false God, a made-up God, and not a very nice God, a God somewhere so far away it can't be reached, and all sorts of things are done to try to get its attention. If you don't feel immediate oneness with this infinite, mysterious stuff, you start feeling like a speck of the dust. You start feeling like a random act of nature. You start feeling like there's no connection to anything. And it's very hard to connect to other human beings if you don't feel connected to the universal first, right? So in our personal lives, people who feel less than will take it out on anyone they perceive as a threat. And they always have a long list of who's a threat. They're in your offices. They're the schoolyard bully. They're in your family. They're in positions of leadership. And most surprisingly, they're in our churches. We call them the walking wounded. And those are folks who have a deep psychic soul wound that has not yet been healed, but can be. And that's where our compassion comes in, for ourselves as well. As there's parts that we all have unhealed aspects of ourselves, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah, but we have compassion, and we have a teaching that allows us to apply certain practices that will raise our self-esteem. Self-love is so important. So important. A collective low self-esteem is always based on a worldview that is devoid of feeling being one with Source. And that's what the Dalai Lama meant when he said you've got to have quantum physics in your religion, because quantum physics says we're all one. There's a unified field of consciousness. The universe is more like a big thought than a big thing. This is really cutting edge stuff, but it goes right back to this teaching. And any spiritual tradition that has endured down through the ages knows this. There's one something being all. It's right here, right where we are all the time. It is our power, and it is our power to use. So unworthiness, as I'm always saying, is the basis for most crime and violence. And last week I said it's also the basis for all the isms. There's nothing in the human soul that would actually hate difference. This is why little kids don't see it. They just see someone to play with, whether it's a bug or a kid from a different country, a different skin color. They don't care. I remember watching my own children when they were little. They would just run to the nearest kid, didn't matter if they'd never met them, and they'd start dancing and playing or throwing a ball or whatever they did. That's the soul. We have to train people to hate each other. You know that. So it's a learned reaction to the outer world when there's no real emotional connection to the source of the world. Therefore, to whatever it is. So the connection is spiritual, and that's the point that many religions have failed to emphasize. They try to get people to be good to those who are different, but just underscores the false idea that there's something wrong with difference. I mean, think about this. We want to be nice to those who are different. Nobody's different. It's just us chickens here. It's all one garden of different kinds of flowers, right? The whole of nature proves it. There's no difference. So to teach people to love difference is a really lousy thing to do. Teach them to love themselves with all their stuff, with their woundedness, but also to love themselves as a soul, as an emanation of the Spirit, as the spark. Then you love everybody. And you love everybody as a potential expression. You love everybody as a human partner and a spiritual equal. It doesn't mean you're going to go out to dinner with everybody. There are people that are in different levels of consciousness, but it means you see through it and acknowledge them for the potential that they are. There's no teaching on this planet other than ours and a few mystical traditions from the East that teach we are unified in one God. No separation whatsoever. One of my favorite people to quote is Dr. Howard Thurman, who was an amazing Christian minister in the 20th century, great scholar too. He said, quote, "We should never mistake conformity for harmony, uniformity for synthesis. We should know that for all people, to be alike is the death of life, and yet perceive harmony that transcends all diversities, and in which diversity finds its richness and significance." So, diversity is proof of oneness. Otherwise, there'd be 85 trillion different gods. One for you, and one for you, and one for you, and one for you. And that ain't so. But we can take heart because love will win the day. The love we spoke of last week, spiritual unity with all life, and a raising of our collective self-regard. That's our part. You know, Christians consider themselves missionaries. We're spiritual emissaries. We're not trying to convert people to come to our center, but we're trying to awaken the spark in people. It's not easy. I fall short all the time. But when I remember, I realize how powerful it is to see through it, see the best. Acknowledge in the eyes that you're looking at yourself. We are, right? Remember one time in a darshan, someone asked Swami Muktananda, there's a few hundred people in the room, and they said, what do you see when you look at us, Baba? He says, all I see is light. All I see is light. I have to make myself come back to this dimension to see the difference. But all I see is light, because that's all we are, right? Really, we are condensed light. So knowing that, knowing those kinds of things that are rather scientific helps us to not be stuck in this body or in what we think is possible for humanity. It helps us to realize there really aren't any boundaries. There really aren't any parameters to what humanity can be. We really are spiritual beings first, and we can do anything we put our mind to. So love is the answer. And so let's begin with our own conscious transformation. Look at how we deeply feel about ourselves as individuals and see if we aren't up for some renewal ourselves. Seriously, on a scale of 1 to 10, how high is your self-love? Are there conditions on it? You know, that, and we all have things we could improve on that one level. I'm talking about spiritually. Do we love ourselves as spiritual beings? Extremely important. So there may be some areas of our lives that look pretty good and are an indication of a healthy self-esteem, because we're not all one thing. But other areas of our lives might need some attention. And most of us are fairly healthy when it comes to self-regard, but especially in a group like this, who are people who are in this teaching. But there's always room for expansion. You know, self-esteem is not narcissistic, which is a word is being used way too much to describe way too many people right now. It's not conceit. Self-love is the highest level of spiritual awareness. It's an absolute acknowledgement of spirit, of God is present right where we are. It's a recognition of our indwelling spirit. So it's never based on accomplishments or titles or trophies of any kind. You know, it's rooted in our sense of being the intentional expression of a perfect life. So imagine what this culture would be like if no one was trying to get trophies. Because that's what we're doing. Money is a trophy. Beauty is a trophy. Youth is a trophy. Power is a trophy. The most sickening photo I saw last week was of a young woman sitting astride a dead giraffe holding up her rifle like she had won a trophy. No, she just revealed her very low self-esteem. That you would have to kill a magnificent creature, a fellow being, for a trophy? That indicates to me self-loathing beyond anything. Of course, they don't know it, right? Because it's culturally accepted. It's culturally accepted to garner trophies by taking somebody's life or life force or the good, right? So the problems begin, as I spoke about last week, when we place ourselves separate and apart from God, and therefore from the planet, and therefore from nature, and therefore from other beings, and that's a recipe for abuse. So just to get our juices flowing this morning, I cooked up something I hope you'll want to say out loud. It's kind of provocative, but I'm anything, but no, I'm always provocative. So, and I did this for myself today with someone in my life that needs to hear it. So I want you to think of somebody now. And it could be from your past, somebody who's already moved on, but someone who's still dancing around in your consciousness is something you have to deal with, right? You know who that is, right? So just pick one and say this out loud. Picture that person. And you can do this all day for other people. Okay, repeat after me. I am not here to please you.
I am not here to please you.
Or give you what you are missing.
Or give you what you're missing.
My life path at this point is to unlearn what was taught, be mindful in the moment, and to love myself. You You see, I'm not here to please you, and I'm not here to give you what you think is missing, and I'm not here to teach you what you already know. I'm here to help us unlearn and to learn a different truth. I'm here to be mindful in this moment, and I'm here to love myself as you are. So it's wonderful if people approve of us, but that's not why we do what we do. If you need approval to make a decision, you're in trouble. And that doesn't mean being arrogant. It just means being clear about who you are and what is yours to do, right? So you're not here to please other people. They may be pleased, but that's not your job. And when we love ourselves, we tend to radiate a different energy and a different presence. We become disarming. You take the arms out of someone's hand. You take the gun out of their hand, their mental gun, their emotional gun. You are a disarming person when you love yourself because you know that that person can't actually take anything from you, right? It's our fear of each other that causes us to act out and do really dumb things. So the future of humanity is this great contribution that we can all make. It comes before everything. A healthy self-image makes us available to new ideas, available to change. It makes us to being welcomed in any group we're in. It's an irresistible energy like light in a dark room. That spark, that divine spark. So the invitation this week is to fill our life with beauty. Honor that soul that gets goosebumps. Visit art museums. Go to a symphony or a concert. I just read a study that showed that people who go to concerts, and it included rock and roll concerts, by the way, jazz concerts, symphony, people who go to concerts have a longer life expectancy than people who don't. You know why? Because they are sitting in a venue that pleases them. It pleases their soul, and that's why they live longer. So plant flowers or bring them into your home or create periods of silence, cook some really good food, make a big pot of soup or something. The soul needs real, not artificial stuff. It needs real food, real people, real friends, real music, real color. All of that is what the soul needs. And when we start feeding the soul, life gets so much better. And it's pretty simple. You know, what we're doing for the most part is very complicated. Remember my definition of complicated and complex that I got from Jim Kinney? Complicated is a bunch of symphony instruments piled outside the rehearsal hall. Complex is when they're all being played together, right? So we are very complex in our inner world, but we have complicated things by thinking we're something else, by thinking we're just a psychology, we're just an ego in a body. Okay, one more thing. Another study showed that dancing improves brain function. That's why I'm so smart, because I dance all the time. I love to dance. Join a choir. Singing is another one that activates the soul. You don't have to be a good singer, just sing. Get into a dance group. I have a friend, a minister, who's in her 60s who tap dances. And I told her, I said, you're never going to get old because, she tap dances on stage in groups. She goes, they perform with little short things. And she's ageless, right? It keeps, because she's a minister. She has big responsibilities, but it keeps her soul happy. You got to have that soul outlet. My soul is getting ready to go to Hawaii next week. And so I'm telling you, that's my soul place. I met my children's father there. I learned meditation there. I discovered this teaching there. I started my path to ministry there. I can name some other stuff that are a little more personal, but everything wonderful that set me on a new path happened to me in Hawaii. So when I go there, I'm going home. I could get verklempt right now just talking about it because there's something about it. I get off that plane and I'm like, home. And my kids were raised there, so the three of us are going with extended family, but it's the best thing I can do for myself right now. I need it. Okay, so Get busy reconnecting with your true self, because that's where God is. Not up there, not out there, right inside you. And then we can be that spark that the Aga Khan suggested we can be for others. So when I go to Hawaii this week, I was going to take my laptop and do my daily, and then I said, no. Unplug. And plug into Hawaii. You know, as they say in Hawaii, plug them in. So I'm going to plug in the true self. So I won't be doing my daily writing, because I want to be fully present. I want to be mindful in the moment. I want to soak up the beauty, feel the presence, and reconnect with my soul. And so it is. All right, let's do a little closing. And welcoming the presence in our mind, as we always know it is present. Behind every thought, behind every emotion, behind all feeling, behind all visible physical form, there is that beautiful, loving God, that presence, the one that has no real name, and yet we attribute to it the great I am, because we feel it inside. Something is being us, something greater than any idea we've ever had of ourselves knows itself as us. And that something is love. Unconditional, compassionate, joyful, playful love. And it wants to find its counterpart in the world. It finds it in music, in dance, in singing, in beauty, in color, in diversity. It finds it in all of nature. It says, play, love this life, love yourself, and everything else shall be added unto you. And so with that in mind, we bring this morning's message to a close, but we begin on a higher level of living. For everything that is good belongs to us right now. We have a natural birthright of spiritual abundance. We have an inheritance of creative ideas that never stop. We have universal vitality that downloads as this body and creates perfect health, perfect energy, flexibility, and mobility. But most of all, we have access to the immediacy of love, that power that makes all things new, that power that has no opposition, that power that is irresistible, that power that lives in our soul. And so today we leave here with a greater commitment to self-love, to self-respect, to self-regard, with a greater commitment to our spiritual practice, that we might unlock that aspect of us that knows and is never fooled. We leave here today in gratitude, thankful for this moment in time where we realize there's good for me and I ought to have it. And Spirit knows how to bring it through me. And so we bless this day and everything that happens after this moment as good and very good. And we are very grateful to be present right here, right now, loving who we are. And so it is.